So in this video we're going to be loading the GeoLiteCity database and trying to run some scripts. So we're going to start that. The first thing I need to do is type in the commands for the download and see if we can get that installed. I typed in the command right here and it collected the dpkt that we need to have and installed it successfully. It tells me. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is go out and get the geoIP, geoIP, and see if we can get that installed. It installed successfully, so good so far. And we need to get some setup tools, so we're going to do that. Alright, so the Python setup tools installed successfully. I'll be looking forward to using those things. Alright, and now we need to get the pygeoip. So change the directory for that. So that's been installed. We're going to try changing the directory and seeing how things work there. The next thing we want to do is go to this web address and download the GeoLiteCity.dat. This is a database that's going to have a lot of the cities, and we can map IP addresses. So go to this link here, and I'll throw that in the description so that you guys can just cut and paste it, which is what I did. And then we want to download, save the file. Once it's saved, it'll be in your downloads directory, and you can see it right here in the DAT. I'm going to go ahead and grab it, and I'm going to move it to a little folder here where I'm going to put my assignments for my work for this project. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste it in here. So now I have the database in here, and this is also where I'm going to write my Python code, and we'll be ready to do that pretty soon. So we've gone through all the steps as far as loading the software that we need, and the modules, I mean. And now we have the database, and now we can begin to code. I'll also open a terminal from here, so you can just right click in this space. It makes it really easy. Open terminal here, and then this comes up already, so you don't have to change directories, they're just already there, which is really handy. I'm just going to call mine the geoIP search. I don't know what else to call it. Save it as a PY, create it, and now I have this. I could open this up with the idle 3.9, but I'd much rather use my PyCharm that I have installed here, so I'm going to use that instead. So just a reminder on how to get to PyCharm to run it. We want to go ahead and type in the OPT, because that's where we saved it when we installed PyCharm. And so I'm using the Community Edition. For some reason I had issues with the Professional Edition in Kali, so I went ahead and used the Community Edition. You can just go in here, and you want to be in this directory here, and you also want to be in the bin. And then just do a right click right here. I love the right click here. Do open terminal, and now we have an open terminal in the PyCharm bin directory right here. And so for you, if you've downloaded it somewhere else, just find the PyCharm community directory, and then make sure you go into the bin. And then the next thing is simply to type in the yep, that's the command I want. Oh, excuse me. So let's go do that. And what we want to do, oh, and this won't work without a dot in here. So let's make sure that that's in there. All right, and we should be good. Okay, that did not work. Where are we going? Is it working? I'm not sure. Let's see what happens here. Might take a second to load. Looks like a couple errors, but see what happens. I had a lot of issues with PyCharm running in Kali, and there seems to be some issues with the Java runtime not having enough memory, and I just don't have the time to troubleshoot it. So I'm going to go ahead and just run this in the idle. So you see idle here, and I have my text editor here set up to start coding, and I have the console opened up to the proper directory, which is right here, so that we can run our code from here. And so the next thing we need to do is, of course, start programming in order to do the project. And the test came out good. So what I did is I'm going to be importing these modules right here. We're going to be using all of these, and I always put my little create my little template for the main, and I just put print test, and basically just set it up in this manner. And I do this just to make sure that everything's going to be imported properly, it's all going to work, and then I run it. You can see I've made a lot of mistakes in my run, and that's because I've been working for several hours and I'm tired and starting to make mistakes. So over here, I do want to go over some of the mistakes because some of these are common mistakes. The first one is when this one right here, when this didn't run, that's because I didn't use an uppercase S, and the file is an uppercase S. And remember, Python is case sensitive, so of course that didn't work. And so I fixed it and ran it again, and then it ran the code, but then notice this. Well, what I had forgotten was, again, because I'm tired, is I forgot to put the second single quotation after the test. And so I did that, ran it again, but I had forgot to save the file, because you have to save it, and so it came up with the same error. So I saved the file, and then ran it again, and then we get the actual correct output right here, that it in fact did run properly. Okay, so I'll probably take a break before I code anymore, because I am a bit tired and making really simple mistakes, which I shouldn't be doing. Anyways, we're getting a good start, and well, not really too much of a start. We're set up, but we still need to write our code to do some things, and so probably take a little bit of a break before I continue forward. Okay, so I added some code. And the first thing here, let me actually turn the line numbers on. Alright, so on line 7 is we're accessing the GeoIP database that we downloaded. It's actually right here. And so we're going to open it. We're telling the system where it's, which one it is, which is this one, and then we're adding it to this variable, which we're going to call GI. And then I did include the parser stuff. Now, this part here shouldn't need too much explanation. I did change the from using the opt parse to the arg parse, because opt parse is depreciated, and so I wanted to use the latest one that will work with Python 3, and so that's arg parse. So I import arg parse, and then I set parser equal to arg parse dot argument parser, short description, and then on line 11 we add our argument arg parser. We're going to be setting the type here to a PCAP file, which is the file that we're going to be using when they import it, not import it, but when they enter it in the command line. And then for the args parser, we're going to parse that, and then we're going to check here and make sure that they actually entered something. If they didn't, then we're going to exit the program. Otherwise, we're going to set a variable which is the exact same thing, PCAP file equal args.pcap file. So whatever they enter is going to get set to this variable, and then we will send it to some other functions. But this is the setup right here. So all this is doing is loading the database and setting up the command line arguments for the user to enter their information. That's all we've done right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that, and you can see I did run this, and this came out correctly. So everything ran, everything was imported, all this is set up properly, and the code got all the way to right here to the if statement. It was none, so it exited. So the code got to line 18 and then exited the program, which is what it's supposed to do because there was nothing entered. So this is good. We're at a good stopping point. Like I said, I'm going to take a break, and then I'll come back and continue on with this little project. So one of the things we need to do in order to make all this work is we need to find the appropriate IPv. So let's, I'm going to write a short little function that'll do that. And I'll write it real quick. Okay, so this is what this is going to do is it's going to try and find out if we're using IPv4 or IPv6. So it looks for that. If it fails, then it tries the next one. It's got to be one or the other. And then it's going to return that, well, this right here, the socket.inet, and then the appropriate, whether it's 4 or 6. We're going to be using this in one of our functions I haven't written yet, and so, but it's something that needed to be done. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a function that's going to find the geographical address of the city, and I'm going to stick that right here. And actually, now's the time when I'm going to go ahead and just call these the auxiliary. You don't need to do this. I just do this out of habit for keeping my functions straight and reminding myself where I'm at in the code. Okay, so we have this nice little function called retrieve geostrip. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be passing it an IP address. We're going to look up that IP address by name. We're going to try and find this. Then we're going to decode the geographical address of the city. And we'll be using our geolocate. And so all of this stuff is will be working because we imported this right here. Remember the database? So the GI on line 7 is the database. And so down here, we're going to be using that right here on line 38 to try and find it. And hopefully we can find it. And then it'll return the location. Otherwise, it's going to return unregistered. So that's all this does. It takes the IP address, uses the database, tries to decode it. And let me organize it a little better. If it can find the city, then as long as there is a city, by the way, then it'll look it up and it'll return the geolocation equals city plus the county, the country, with a little comma on there. Else, geolocation will equal the country, and then it returns the geolocation. And if there's an exception, if something doesn't work, then it jumps to here and just returns unregistered. So it's going to try this, and then if it doesn't, returns unregistered. That's it. That's all we're doing right here. So, oh, and I should probably explain lines 41 and 42. So remember that the rec is the database, this right here. This is equal to the GI, which is the database that we declared above. And so when you see this right here, this received city and received county code 3, these are fields in the database. That's what these are. And so also called attributes, but we'll just call them fields. So they're fields or columns in the database. And so we're looking at those fields to try and retrieve the data that is in those database, in those fields. And that's what we're doing. And then, of course, we're running a little statement to see if it matches. And that's really it. Okay, so it's actually a really simple little script. Not too much going on here. Lines 33 through 52. Well, actually, there's a lot going on here, but it's not as complicated as it looks. Pass the IP address. Pull the records from the database, and then pull out the two field names from the database with their data, and then do a comparison, and that's really it. And then of course handle it if it fails. Okay, so we're getting closer and closer to this being done. I think that completes our auxiliary functions. So I like to put in here where this is called from. This is going to be called from the print PCAP, and this is also called from, I believe, the same spot. I'm pretty sure it is. I haven't written this, by the way. So this is going to be right in here, right above the function, the auxiliary functions. And you can see that we're calling it right here on line 25. So this function needs to exist, but it doesn't yet. And we're just going to create an empty one right now. For right now, it is going to take an argument, as you can see. It's going to take the PCAP. We could name it anything. It's not. Doesn't have to be PCAP. Now, up in line 25 will be past PCAP, but down here, when you name the argument, you can name it whatever you want. I typically name them the same, so that way, I think it's less confusing. Okay, and we're just going to do a return right now. So this function will exist. So now it exists, there's just nothing there, and this function is called from the main, and then it's going to use these two auxiliary functions down here to get the job done. So we're getting a lot closer. Let's go ahead and save this. Okay, so now we're ready to start working inside of this function. And what we need to do is print the packets and parse the packet and extract the IP address. After we do that, we're going to try and convert to the IP address string format and then print our information. So most of the work we're going to be doing is actually going to be done by our two auxiliary functions. But this one right here is going to handle calling these functions and just the organization. And also the prints are going to happen in here too. Okay, so we have the function written here, the print PCAP. And we're going to process each packet. Again, almost all of the work, the real work, is being done in the auxiliary functions. Here we're using the dpkt module that we imported right up in here, and we're going to use the Ethernet properties to extract the address. Down here we're going to extract the IP address and convert it to the format string. So that's really about it. Well, the IP is extracted right up in here on line 38 and then converted to a string here. And then we print the stuff out. That's really it. I haven't tested the code yet, but it looks pretty clean. There'll probably be a few issues. I'm going to go ahead and run it and then test it and make any changes, and then I'll let you guys know how that goes. Okay, so I ran the code. I put the PCAP file here in the directory, and I ran it, and I came up with nothing but unregistered items. So I clearly did something wrong. I got to do a little bit of troubleshooting to figure out what happened, and as soon as I figure that out, I'll let you know. So after a little bit of troubleshooting and trying some different PCAPs, and again, the PCAPs are simply packet captures usually from WireShark. I used WireShark to do some packet captures. And anyways, here's the correct code. It's really wasn't anything different. I tested it, and what it was the packets I had just didn't have anything that was registered, so the code was actually working. I did it formatted a little bit better so that it's easier to understand. So again, lines 33 right here through 52. This is what actually calls the auxiliary functions. I guess I should make that plural. In order to capture the internet, the actual city and country of our different IP addresses. Okay, so I'll make sure that the source code for all of this is listed in my GitHub account, which there'll be a link in the description page of this channel. All right, so all this works. Just need to save it now, and then I'll just do the old right-click open terminal here in this directory, and that's what we need. That's the command we need. This is the file that I'm running, which is the file that we were looking at over here, and then this is, of course, the PCAP that we need to the packet that we're going to analyze. All right, so let's hit enter. And you can see it immediately goes through the IP addresses, source IP address, destination IP address, and the original city and country for each, and going straight down the list. Okay, so that was it. It was a little bit more challenging for me than I would like to admit. I had to look up a few things and make sure stuff was right. Again, some things were depreciated, so I had to find the correct code. But anyways, this is running in Python 3. I think it looks good, and is a very, very handy tool. So, happy coding.